session. So good morning, good afternoon, folks, from wherever you are joining in. I know Richard is joining from London, so it's morning for him. So yeah, welcome to Elite CISO's weekly webinar, which we have been executing from almost 5 years now, and we bring international experts in this forum. And the today's topic, what you see on the screen, is harnessing AI for data security, a rubric guide to proactive risk management. Now, AI is the new buzzword, right? As you know, so no session goes without talking about AI or machine learning. I was in Gartner last week, and it was a 2 day conference, and about 99.99% sessions they were talking about AI, right? So that's the buzzword of AI these days is. So today what we'll do is we have expert speakers with us. So Richard is a field CISO for Rubrik, and he's based out of UK. We also have Tarun, the enterprise sales director for Rubrik, and both of them will share insights around AI in terms of how Rubrik is addressing it, right, from their perspective. From the agenda perspective, what you see on the left of the screen is a quick introduction. So initial 5 minutes we spend introducing, setting up things, and then we have about good 40-45 minutes for the session, which will be divided between Tarun and Richard. And then at the end, we will save about 10 minutes for Q&A. We'll do live Q&A. We'll also have a Wheel of Fortune. And the Wheel of Fortune, this time there are multiple giveaways, right? So what you see on the screen is a full body electric massager. So we'll have 5 giveaways for that. And then a AWS workshop pass for about 15,000 rupees. That's going to be a mega giveaway for folks, only for the Elite CISO members, first of all, and those who reposted the Elite CISO post on LinkedIn regarding this particular event. Okay, so they are eligible for this. Now, last but not the least, what you see is the stand and attend. Now, this is the challenge we have been giving since the very beginning of this Elite CISOs webinar series. You see on the screen, right? I'm not bored of this slide, because from past 5 years, this slide or a different format we have been presenting. Why? Because the reason is very important. Okay, the the two gentlemen and a lady that you see on the screen on video right now, they are sitting, they are inviting these problems, right? I'm not asking them to stand, but okay, it's a warning that if we sit a lot as CIO CISOs, we might have all these problems. And I do not want Elite CISO to be another reason that I invite you guys here for 1 hour and ask you to sit. Okay, so take this challenge. While you are attending this session, why don't you stand like I'm standing right now and attend this session? Okay, and so that's what we should do, even in a regular practice. It is 3:04 right now. With this, let me transfer it over to Tarun, who is enterprise sales director at Rubrik, for the initial welcome and setting the context for the session. So over to you, Tarun.
Thank you, Vikas, and thanks for making us conscious right up front. My apologies. I am not using a standing desk today, but appreciate the warning, and I'll take it more seriously than a cyber threat,
Sure,
to be honest.
sure.
So thanks for bringing it up. Okay, so let me just share the screen, team. Thanks everybody for agreeing to spare this hour with us, right? With Richard and me. I will just use maybe the first 5-7 minutes, 10 minutes max to actually set the context here, and then I'll hand it over to Richard. Because if you could just confirm, is my screen visible to you? Can you see this well?
Yeah, it's well. Go ahead,
Okay, good.
please.
I'll quickly go ahead. So thanks, team. Yeah, and I'll start here. So maybe not the best way to start, but I really want to start with a warning, right? As per a report from 10 Micro, the first half of calendar year 2023, India faced the maximum number of cyber events in Asia, right? So the nation's data is at risk. That's the real warning here. And even if you look at it globally, from a global standpoint, uh, India was amongst the top three along with United States and Brazil. So this is just to set the context that the reason we are investing this time and you are investing this hour with us, I think it's going to be worthwhile because we're going to talk about something that you can do to actually ensure that you don't become part of such events anytime in your future, right? So while data regulations and tax are exploding, right, at an unprecedented rate, what is also important to see here is that some of these numbers are really unfathomable, right? For example, 291 zettabytes is the kind of data that we are expecting to be to be created or to be existing by 2027. That's as per a worldwide IDC forecast report, right? We've all read about data regulations. In 2021, there were 137 countries across the world who had put in, specifically the federal and the government, that had put in regulations around data. And India also joined the bandwagon last year when they released their first Data Privacy Act, better known as DPDP, or Digital Personal Data Protection Act. And if you look at the number of ransomware attacks that have happened up to 2021, again, this is a report by Sonic Wall Cyber Threat, they said 620 million plus attacks have actually already happened, right? Now, if you were to put this into context, think about it that ransomware attacks is something that's actually gained prominence only in the later part of the last decade. So if you put that into context, then you see at what rate are these happening. And as per another report, by 2031, we'll probably be experiencing a ransomware attack every 2 seconds. So while all of this is really exploding, the security of this data is still slipping through the cracks, right? For one of the two reasons on your screen. The one on the left, the traditional cybersecurity approach tells organizations and all of the people on this call that we need to focus on prevention. We need to prevent the inevitable, right? But can we really do that is the question. Because a lot of our friends work in the area of perimeter prevention, network application, endpoint identity prevention, and all of us, all organizations really have such measures, checks, and balances in place. But the sad part is that threat actors are still able to get through the data, bypassing all of these prevention mechanisms. When that happens, you're going to depend on your backup and recovery operations. But unfortunately, if you take a legacy approach or a traditional approach there, then you are clearly creating silos in terms of where your data sits and where is the management engine. Now, this has been true for the better half of the past 3-4 decades since backup and cyber recovery and recovery actually came into existence. And that is where the threat actors are actually leveraging the supply chain vulnerabilities because you're depending on multiple components. They don't take care of the zero trust security principles in place, and hence they are still able to get through the data. So these are the two dominant reasons where we are still seeing that security is slipping through the cracks. To add to that problem, data is no more residing within boundaries, right? Gone are the days when data used to sit inside the data center and you could add make all these preventions actually work. Data sitting not just on-prem, in databases, in file servers, in NAS devices, but also outside the boundary in cloud and your SaaS vendors as well, right? If you're using a SaaS service, your data is actually sitting with the SaaS vendor themselves. So what are the key questions given that this is happening? Where is your sensitive data? The number one question, right? How is your posture? Who has access to that sensitive data? Your own employees, your partners, your vendors, etc. Your customers, who has access to this data? How is that access changing over a period of time? And the most important, is that secured, right? So with this becoming, the data becoming prevalent across these boundaries, the surface area for the enterprise has also been expanded. The other problem that I want to highlight is the rise of double extortion now, right? In the event of a breach, what bad actors originally did was they encrypted the data. And what was the recovery plan for that? You were able to recover data if you had a resilient backup with you. But now they are also exfiltrating data, which means they are taking away the data that you have, not just encrypting it. Can you recover that? The answer is no. Once the data has been exfiltrated, there is no recovering your data. And that highlights the importance of cyber resilience. So technically, if your data is encrypted in a breach, which will happen because preventions are being breached, your approach to cyber resiliency is cyber recovery. You need to have a solution in place that can help you recover. And in case of exfiltration, since you cannot recover after data has been exfiltrated, you need to have the right cyber posture in place. And that is precisely where Rubrik comes in. I'm not going to spend time on this today because Richard is going to talk about another aspect of this, which is how we are helping you, how we are using artificial intelligence to actually bridge this problem. But just to give you a bird's eye view, the Rubrik platform doesn't only help you with protecting the data with native capabilities of immutability, air gap, etc., but also helping you analyze the threats, giving you the right data security posture so that you can keep the posture right, and helping you with the recovery as well, right? We can talk about it in a little more detail in another session that Vikas helps us organize, but this was just to give you an overview. We are a relatively new organization with only 10 years in existence, but this is a view of some of our customers across different verticals like financial services, healthcare, etc. That we wanted to give you a snapshot for. We have around 6,000 plus customers already across the globe now, right? And not just that, we are heavily invested in India as well, right? We have 1,000+ seater campus in Bangalore, which is one of our core R&D centers outside the US, and which consistently attracts top talent. In terms of our customers, 3 of the top 10 private banks are already invested with us. We have top global Indian GSI with us. We have a global BPO operating out of India who's also with Rubrik, and many other leading pharma, retail, and research organizations. So what makes it so different? Before I hand it over to Richard, just a couple of more charts. The differentiated approach, one, we work with strategic partners like Zscaler, Microsoft. So Zscaler is a close friend who's also working in the same prevention domain, right? We are working with them to ensure that not just prevention, but resilience tie together and give you the right posture. We are working with Microsoft, who's also an equity investor in Rubrik, by the way. We are working with them to co-engineer solutions for M365 offerings. We also give you a $10 million warranty if we are managing your data in Rubrik, and in case of a cyber threat, for any reason, we are not able to recover that data, we are liable to pay up to $10 million in warranty. That's a unique thing that we started in the industry. And in the worst case, when you are hit by an attack, you don't have to worry about what to do, where to go, because we have a dedicated ransomware response team also for Rubrik customers that is spread across the globe. And they've already helped 150 plus customers of Rubrik who have been tagged by a cyber threat, right? So if at all a threat actor comes in, or you are impacted by a ransomware, you just open an incident with the ransomware response team of Rubrik. They hold you through from that point up to the time you recover your data. In the case of these 150 customers that they have assisted or that have been attacked with Rubrik, with their data being managed by Rubrik, none of them have paid any ransom, and they have recovered all of their data. So the future of cybersecurity is not just under prevention. While there are great players that you work with in the prevention space, we are saying that resilience is also important, because only doing prevention is an approach that is no more successful. With that, we have also introduced our Gen AI companion called Ruby, right? That abstracts all of what I've spoken in terms of Rubrik capabilities and value into a natural language interface. And to talk about how artificial intelligence is impacting the cyber industry, how can prevention and vendors like Rubrik actually use it to counter that, I will hand it over to Richard now. Richard, over to you. Your screen is visible.
One moment, I do apologize. Let's just re-share that. Here we go. Thank you very much for that great introduction, Tarun. It sets us up very nicely for what we're about to dive deeper into. So first of all, really very much appreciated to EliteCISOs for inviting me along to this discussion. And normally I would be standing at my home office. I have a standing desk, but when you're traveling, you don't tend to have that luxury. So forgive me for not jumping on the bandwagon, which is very important, by the way. I completely agree. Now, so one of the things that is interesting is I've been in industry for about 25 years already. I've seen a lot of wave of technologies come and go. Even before cloud was a thing, I was involved in the industry, and I've sat specifically on the cybersecurity, deep security side. And really what I've been involved in is sort of deep cyber investigations. I've done breach teams and response teams for nuclear power stations, car manufacturers, banks, etc., and following APT groups across the world based upon their activity and the way they operate. And with the introduction of the prevalence of AI, one of the things I'm really keen to do in industry is talk very straightforward about how we can take AI and how we can operationalize it in a way that changes our maturity and capability in protecting our data and also in detecting the APT, the cyber criminal activity, and so on and so forth. And so what we're going to cover in these slides is a little bit of a background as to how we've got where we are in the industry. And then we're going to dive into not just a Rubrik perspective on applied artificial intelligence in data and cybersecurity, but also other techniques and tools that you should be using from an AI perspective to mature your risk-based practice, right? Managing risk as best you can. So let's jump into the first slide. So AI is definitely grabbing the headlines in the news recently, but I wanted to move away from all of the sensational news that we see with AI around the latest capabilities and the what Google are doing with their DeepMind projects through their various tool sets, what OpenAI are doing, and of course Elon Musk through Grok. It's great to see AI develop at the rate that it is, but actually there's an undertone of challenges that we need to be aware of, right? So there's a lot of concern in the industry about AI potentially replacing jobs in many sectors, and we're seeing some of that happen already. In fact, only yesterday did we see Klarna, which is a very large provider of finance to thousands and thousands of businesses across the world. They've successfully used AI to mimic their customer services operations, and in doing so, they theoretically could automate a lot of the jobs, which is a massive concern. And we'll talk about where regulation can help with that in a moment. There's also AI deals being struck with vendors that hold large amounts of data, selling their data to train AI models to the various major AI groups. And then there's a lot of other concerns about what is AI going to look like from a workforce perspective over the next 5, 6, 10 years or so. My view on this is different. I don't think AI is going to replace the humans in the workforce. I believe that AI is going to enable and be a partnership for our future workforce. And it's something that legislation, regulation has to work to protect and understand. But I wouldn't be sitting here today being concerned about the position in the workforce perspective. I'd be starting to look at where AI can help hyper enable the workforce. And what we're going to really cover is where AI can hyper enable you from a cyber resilience and a data security perspective as well. So let's take a brief look at the history of AI. It's important to understand just where we are and where we're going, which is really more interesting. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because it would take hours and hours to present all of the kind of key aspects here. But what I would like to talk about is where AI has come in the last 10 years. And actually, one of the biggest statistics that you need to be aware of is AI has already outpaced Moore's law. Right? Moore's law is the concept that computer power or processing power will double or so every 2 years. In the last 10 years, the most sophisticated AI capabilities are now 5 billion times more powerful than they were 10 years ago. And that's going to be an exponential curve of capability and improvement and enhancements. So we're going to see that number possibly larger in the next 5 years. Maybe in the next 2 years, it'll eclipse 5 billion times. And so what does that mean for business? Well, it means you really have to understand that AI is going to become a critical part of how you stay ahead of the curve in terms of how you automate your operations, in how you secure your data, in how you remain competitive in the business landscape, and many other things in between. And it's important to understand that we need to look at how we adopt AI in an intelligent way. And one of the key companies that have driven a lot of these changes, no doubt, is OpenAI. And ChatGPT, again, not to delve into the history too much, but there's arguably 3 core phases of artificial intelligence in the industry. The first is what we call artificial narrow intelligence, or ANI. And artificial narrow intelligence is where we're at today. It's the ability to perform specific tasks using large language models, for example. We've heard recently that large action models, LAMs, are on the horizon. There's a company called Rabbit, which premiered at the CES show not long ago, where they're able to have AI mimic the behavior of a user in an application so that you completely automate how you interact with your various applications and services. And it's no longer prompt-based, it's action-based. So if we think about ChatGPT, the rate of innovation of that platform alone has been astonishing. And as of October last year, the verbal IQ of ChatGPT was 158 points. And that's significantly higher than the global average verbal IQ, by the way. And the scary fact isn't just that; it's that in 5 years they predict it to be over 2,500 times smarter than that. So if you're sitting here listening to this webinar thinking, should I adopt AI? Is AI going to really make a big difference in my business operations? The answer is absolutely resounding yes. The question we have to ask is, how do we do it in an intelligent way? How do we do it in a way that doesn't fall foul of regulatory confinements when they start to be developed? I mean, we are seeing some progress around EU legislation. There's legislation in North America to the SEC. We're seeing the same in India. But there hasn't been a general global consensus yet on regulation. That's something we'll talk about a little bit later. So you have to balance that in business as well. If I'm going to adopt AI in my organization, how do I do it in a way that means that if I do adopt it, I'm not going to fall foul of regulations as they change, as they progress? So it's important to understand the history, because we're at artificial narrow intelligence at the moment. And the next phase of growth or step in the process was what we call artificial general intelligence. And there's been some news recently that we may already have hit that, and we have Sam Altman predicting that we'll be doing this in the next couple of years. Whether that's going to be true is yet to be seen. I don't think we're too far away from AGI. And then you go beyond AGI to the kind of final step on the ladder, which is artificial superintelligence. So it's an interesting point in history for humanity. It's an interesting point in history for technology. So how do we today leverage AI in a way that really changes the game in terms of our risk management approaches? Well, we can't really jump into that until we understand what we're up against. And so, no good AI presentation is worth its weight in salt unless we talk about the risks that we see around AI. So we already have seen generative AI based threats from conception right through to actual implementation of the threat in the wild. So Checkpoint Research Labs last year created a concept code which, just using natural language interfaces, was able to create a piece of malware which allowed reverse shell access to an organization. And in the lab, it was successfully tested. But actually, only in Q4 of last year, in the calendar year, we saw Fraud GPT being released in the marketplace. And so this is the ability for any attacker, whether you're somebody with a lot of skill sets or whether you're relatively unsophisticated, to go to specific dark web sites, and based upon the target organization that you want to infiltrate, the subscription will be anywhere between $500 and $5,000 per month. And you can run a complete end-to-end fraud campaign by just clicking a button and pointing at an organization. Same with Worm GPT, the ability to create a virus and a piece of malware that will infect and infiltrate a business and essentially steal data. So the interesting thing is we're already seeing AI being used by the adversaries. And so that means that if we're not already leveraging AI on the defensive side of the fence, then we do have some challenges which can be very hard to address without, if you like, fighting fire with fire. And so there's been lots of other interesting trends in last year. Taran talked about some of them. But what's really important is a cyber attack just last year, the data based on last year alone, occurred over 29 seconds. And there's no doubt that AI and automation is fueling a lot of this capability. And I have no doubt at all that the statistics we're going to see in 2024 will be an order of magnitude higher than those that we've seen in the last year. So interesting facts and figures. But what's interesting is the complexity of attacks is something that we're struggling to deal with and have for a very long time. I mean, what's interesting, if I look back over 20 years of industry and I look at how the attackers have operated and their sort of techniques, tactics, procedures, they haven't really changed their operations. They haven't changed the way that they've approached the problem. They've just leveraged technology in the best way possible, because the attackers don't have to play by the rules. And in industry, unfortunately, we do, based on some of the things I talked about earlier. And so we've learned a lot from the mistakes of the past, and we're now starting to understand that we have to get to a level playing field when it comes to dealing with the complexity of attacks. And one of the things that has been very complex for us is the manual aspect of breach investigations, of incident investigations, of the time to answer, then the time to mitigate and recover from these. And we've been doing it a lot with, automation and playbooks. We've been trying to use, security information event management tools to correlate vast amounts of data and then make decisions on where our high risks, medium and low risks are. And this is where AI can really, really help us in understanding vast amounts of data and distilling down super quickly the challenges that we know we're facing, and how, even more so, how we can actually recover and build a response plan that will get us to a point of mitigation much more quickly. The other interesting point in the industry is what we all know about, which is the skill shortage. And we talked about this in the very first slide. Is AI going to replace the workforce? It isn't, but what it's going to be able to do is help narrow that gap in the skill shortage, because narrowband AI, or AI as we know it today, has the ability to empower users of platforms to gain vast amounts of more context as to the problem they're facing or dealing with on screen in a matter of minutes. Whereas it would take, in the days that I was doing breach investigations, it could take hours or days to really understand some of the concepts of the investigation or the breach that you were looking at, whether it was ransomware, whether it was malware, or whether it was, systems failures or events that ultimately led to systems downtime. So with AI, we are already able to hyper mature our ability to understand what we're dealing with and then respond even quicker. So this is where we're going to see AI make a very big difference from a cybersecurity and a cyber resilience perspective. And why is that important? Well, this is a report by our own Zero Labs here at Rubrik, and I'll share a link at the end of this presentation to a site where you can go and ask yourself, answer some questions about your own business, and we can provide some trajectory on how your data will grow and some of the risks that you need to consider. But what's really a stark piece of information from this Future of Data Security report is that in 5 years' time, if we continue to grow our data silos at the rate that they're growing, we're going to be, around 7 times larger in terms of data that we already have. So whatever it is that your data silos are today, whether they're, petabytes or even terabytes, you can multiply that by 7x, and in 5 years that'll be the size of your data estate. And if you think about the cost of just managing your data estate today, and the amount of resources that you're having to expend on not just controlling and storing that data and building a resilience capability, but inspecting it, in ensuring that you have the right security controls, the right to data access governance controls, your ability to stay ahead of the curve by using that data and weaponizing it to look for competitive advantages, to look for security incidents. If we multiply our current data set by 7x, then we are potentially looking at 7x cost increase. So we need to get smarter about what we're doing with our data today, and we have to look at that curve of growth, and we have to try to bring it down somehow, and work with tools that allow us to really understand what's going on in the data, and make sure that we're putting a viable future in terms of not just data growth, but managing that growth trajectory. So how do you do all of this? I've talked about a lot of things, and I've probably shared some very stark pieces of information, but now I really want to delve into what it is that we're doing at Rubrik, but also what we're seeing in the wider industry that will really help you in this space. So the first thing to mention is that there are really kind of 3 core areas of AI that we're using today. And it's important that you leverage all of these in an intelligent way, because you essentially want to get to a point where you're transforming business operations intelligently. And so generative AI is the tool that everybody's talking about today. And really that has some significant benefits, right? It's a natural language interface. It allows users in their own language to ask questions and to gain context, as I mentioned. much more quickly and gather significantly more data points to get to the root of the problem in a much more efficient manner. But machine learning has driven a lot of what Gen AI is today, and was really the kind of founding cornerstone of the large language models that we're seeing growing. And a lot of organizations should still be heavily leveraging machine learning to be able to take their data and drive efficiencies out of their data. So as organizations, if you have vast amounts of data silos and you're not leveraging ML within that already, it's something you should be looking at. You should be looking at how you can gain more, extract more quality information from your data using the right ML algorithms to derive the right patterns and the right data outputs that will essentially drive models that will allow you to leverage Gen AI in a way that gives you generally a much more capable outcome from a business perspective. And deep learning and neural networks is kind of where we're seeing the AGI sort of train go. It's the ability to do advanced pattern recognition, to be predictive with decision making. That's where we want to get to, because at the moment with generative AI, it only knows what it knows, and there's a lot of information bias, and sometimes not all the data it can be trusted, right? There's still big problems here with Gen AI, but we will solve them. But where we're going with deep learning and neural network learning is we're combining machine learning and generative AI to become predictive. And that's really where the industry is pushing hard to get to, because when we get predictive, then we're able to start to really head off at the pass a lot of the business challenges that we're going to be seeing. Now, I know this slide talks a little bit to the Rubrik ecosystem, but actually generalistically, it's something that we should be considering as organizations quite seriously. So generative AI as a cornerstone is there to be an interactive and guided insights capability. Ask questions, expand your horizons, allow generative AI that's based upon your own data and models. And this is really important, and we'll touch on this a little bit later, to give you answers in your organization that matter to you as a business. And if you apply that with machine learning, and what I mean about machine learning for the previous slide is using your own data to gain insights around security intelligence, around your own data structures, your own data intelligence, and use machine learning to help you automate security recommendations, recovery recommendations, and so on and so forth. And there are a lot of platforms out there that do that today, right? And you can make that decision for your business. And then the predictive deep learning tools are quite new to market, right? So Microsoft with Sentry AI, for example, but there's some other vendors as well that are providing platforms that do predictive deep learning capabilities, which are really about expanding the horizons of what you didn't consider in an interaction with your data. And this is where things really become very different and much more mature in terms of business risk management. With generative AI and machine learning, we get data that's specific to our business operations, especially if we implement it in the right way. But with predictive deep learning and tools like Sentry AI from Microsoft, for example, we may be dealing with a particular incident, and it could be an outage, which means that we have to recover an application or a service or whatever it may be, or it may be a security event. What you get from this tool set, from where we're really maturing from an AI perspective, is you get the answer to the question that's on the screen, but you'll also get all of these lateral ancillary data points, which are equally as critical to the resolution of the problem you're facing that you may not have considered. And this works at all levels of business, whether you're C-level, whether you're director level, whether you're working at the coal face of your organization and dealing with data, responding to incidents. Predictive deep learning helps expand your horizons and help you cover a lot of points of risk that you may not have considered in your initial investigation of that particular incident or that particular event. So what I'm saying in summary is combining all three of these technology capabilities is the way to achieve enhanced business risk maturity in terms of managing it and understanding it and staying one step ahead as best we possibly can against the adversaries that are looking to capture our user accounts and access our data and as we said earlier, exfiltrate it and hold you to ransom. And so now I want to delve a little bit more into each of those technology points and talk about some of the vendors I mentioned, but also talk about some of the benefits. So Rubrik have created our own generative AI companion. We call it Ruby, and it's there to do exactly what I talked about a little bit earlier, right? It's about the ability to accelerate your cyber recovery and minimize downtime. And what that means is with Ruby AI, you get to interface with the particular event that you're dealing with or the Rubrik platform and make sure that you're getting the right data to the right sort of backup and resilience problems that your business is facing. And it's really important here because sometimes we don't know what we're dealing with. Sometimes we don't understand the breadth of the problem we're facing. And sometimes we need support in trying to get to the right levels of detail to understand what's been affected, how it's been affected, to help us build a viable strategy for recovery, whether that's, as I said, from a systems outage, whether that's from a cybersecurity breach. Generative AI companions like Ruby really help hyper enable your teams to be able to get to the root of the problem very quickly, and then really equip your security operations team, your IT operations teams with more skills and more context to deal with those problems super quickly. And that's what it's about. It's about responding fast, and it's about bouncing back from these outages or these security incidents in the quickest possible time frame to close down that window of opportunity that the adversaries may have should they be attacking your environment. Microsoft Sentinel, a great platform from a cybersecurity perspective, right? Taking all of this data from all of these disparate systems and correlating this data using machine learning and AI algorithms to look for patterns, to look for security risks, to look for breach risks and everything in between. And so if you can bring together that kind of deep learning predictive analysis capability with the ability to look across the wider environment, so bringing in the cyber resilience platform capability, then you kind of intersect security operations and DevOps and IT ops teams in a way that hasn't been historically possible with technology. And the beauty of kind of combining these two things is you can drive end-to-end security incident investigation, response, and recovery from one UI, from one interface, but using multiple tool sets to give you the outcomes that you require. And the key thing here is you can recover from these incidents in record time and really take the fight back to the front lines of the cyber warfare era that we're in, and not constantly be on the back foot in terms of what has been affected, how has it been effective, and more importantly, how do we recover quickly so that our business gets operational. One of the things you really need to be concerned about is how you're leveraging AI. Now, we know that OpenAI, for example, has the ability to allow you to create your own GPTs, which is you can build a GPT, you can upload data to it and train it on a particular data set. It's really important as a business, because there's a whole lot of data sovereignty, data compliance, even competitive risk issues associated with transporting any corporate data, to a cloud-based environment without it being protected. And so what we have to be doing is, if we're going to be leveraging AI and GPTs, for example, is we have to create our own silos where we protect that data in a way that can't be accessed by general public and general access. So Azure OpenAI is an example of that. You've got the ability to create your own AI capability within a protected environment. And that's really important to do, because you want to be able to ensure that data isn't going to be accessible from a public perspective and therefore cause all sorts of other risks, as I mentioned earlier. But if you do this in the way that we're suggesting, then what you have is the ability for AI to direct your organization on things that it needs to consider, things that perhaps you weren't even looking for. This is where the OpenAI tool becomes really interesting, because when something occurs, what we're going to be seeing, and what we are seeing with generative AI-driven platforms, is once you deal with a scenario, you get recommendations on the things that you need to be doing in addition to that. And this is what I mean by hyper-enabling your businesses to manage risk. Okay, sometimes we get task focused, we get fixated on an incident or a breach. It's attacking a workload in the cloud, or it's attacking a particular service or account. And a lot of our analysts and a lot of our operators get sort of focused on that task of trying to protect that event. but there could be the lateral events that are occurring that are a bigger problem. It could be other services that are impacted. It could be others, databases. It could be whatever that makes up that incident. There could be other things that could be more critical of an issue that you have to deal with now. And where we see generative AI helping is it expands your view of the incident. It automatically generates recommendations based upon the intelligence of your data, and it expands the context of that event, which ultimately leads to much more risk capable controls, and it allows you to really stay way ahead of the curve in terms of how you're managing incidents, how you're responding to incidents. And so, in summary, what you will see with the intersection of machine learning, generative AI, and deep learning is the ability to respond to threats and incidents much faster, and hyper scale and enable your cyber recovery capabilities. And that's a really, really key point in how you should leverage all of these different tool sets. So I want to make sure we have enough time for questions, and we're going to wrap up in the final few slides here. So what does all of that have to do with Rubrik outside of the sort of Ruby AI, generative AI interface we talked about? A lot of people seem to forget that OpenAI, generative AI platforms, machine learning, all relies on your data, and your data sits somewhere. And it can be in multiple locations, right? Multiple cloud service platforms, multiple environments. It can be absolutely everywhere. And the key thing is, if that data is enabling your business to operate and to transact and be as a critical part of really who you are as an organization, then you have to have the ability to be able to secure it and to be able to be resilient in the face of a failure or a particular breach, especially in the case of ransomware, should that data be accessed and encrypted. And so what Rubrik is providing is the ability to have all of your data in one location from a cyber resilience perspective, to be able to look at that data and see what's happening in data at rest, which is a really underserved part of cybersecurity. Look for indicators of compromise, look for ransomware activity, tell you where your sensitive data is, help you understand patterns in that data. And then when it comes to the need to remediate it, be able to do that instantly, right? Recover it straight away. And this is why this is really important. There's a threat that is sneaking up on us in machine learning, in generative AI, in big data, which is hackers are now looking to poison organizations' data. So if you're running generative AI and your own GPT type capabilities, it relies on how you train your data and the models that you're using. So if hackers are able to access your environment, and we know they are very easily from most of the breaches we've seen, then they're going to look at poison that data to be able to affect your organization and cause you to have outcomes you don't want to have. So you have to have the ability to understand when your data changes. So with the Rubrik platform, because we're looking at the data as it's backed up on a regular basis, whether that's hourly or daily, whatever it is, you've got to monitor the changes between each of those iterations. And you've got to be able to see when those changes occur and if those changes present a risk to your business. And if they do, we have to be able to deal with that, recover to a clean state in a secure, validated manner. So we've got to protect the data that we're using to drive our generative AI outcomes, to drive our AI outcomes, to help hyper enable our ability to A, detect threats, to B, recover from downtimes or system failures, and to be able to do that at scale. I touched on regulation a little bit earlier on the slide. This is a big subject in of itself. We could run a completely separate webinar on this subject alone. But the industry is behind the curve on AI regulation. And we have some serious concerns with this, because when you regulate AI as it is today, the rate of change in innovation means that you're going to always be behind the curve, because you can't regulate what you don't know. And regulators are really scrambling to predict what the next moves are around AI, and we're not really winning that battle. So as organizations, you're going to have to look at what the regulators are doing today, what they're planning on doing tomorrow and in the future, and build a program that adopts AI in a sensible and, more importantly, an ethical manner, and that underpins and enables those frameworks and regulations that are outside of AI that you have to adopt. Because compliance has really weighted down organizations in terms of the strategy. We've been very heavily compliance and regulation driven, and business operations have relied on technology to deliver those outcomes. We've got to find a better balance. So we can use AI to help us gain compliance. But when we're using AI to enable business intelligence from an operations and security perspective, we've got to make sure we don't fall foul, most important, of the ethical regulations of AI. So in my advice to you, if you're looking at adopting an AI program in the form that I've suggested, please make sure you maintain ethical operations, because that's the one that will bite you the hardest when those regulators start to build this in as we start to move on the curve of the AI trajectory. And so, look, the key thing is to be able to bridge the gap between what you're doing on an operational perspective to what you're doing from a technology perspective, and having a platform that's able to maintain the visibility of the observability of that data, and to use AI in an intelligent way to be able to meet the compliance regulations, to be able to meet your business operational needs, but also give you a recovery point and a data inspection point that allows you to remain compliant, to remain within the regulatory boundaries and service all of the needs that your business requires. Because if we're not adopting AI in this way, then as businesses, we might find it very difficult to remain competitive in the coming years. And to wrap up, before we go to questions, I did promise some takeaways, and so this presentation will be available to all of you that have attended this webinar. So the Rubrik Zero Lab State of Data Security, it's a great assessment tool for you to look at your own data growth and trajectory and see where those risks are, and then give you some ideas about how you can manage them better. Some very good articles written by our own product teams on 4 things organizations should do around adopting AI and the modules of AI, and then further information on what we're doing with Ruby and how we're integrating with Microsoft and others from a threat investigation, cyber resilience perspective around AI. So that leads me to say thank you very much, to hand it back to Taran and to open up for questions. Many thanks.
Great. Awesome session, Richard. We still have like 13 minutes. So guys, we are on for Q&A.